This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Granger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
With your host, Andrew Donaldson. This is Heard Tell.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Okay, he's back. He's been here before. We always enjoy having Charles Brandt with us. How are you, sir? Welcome back to Heard Tell.
I'm doing great, Andrew. How are you doing this fine day?
Better than some of these folks in California that's dealing with yet another piece of regulatory headache that we got to deal with here. You were writing about it. You wrote about it in the OC Register. Big picture wise, what is it about California that they're always tweaking with regulatory law when it comes to labor? This is what, the third or fourth bill in as many years. It's kind of along these same lines. This is habit. I know it's a blue state. I know it's a progressive state in the power structures of the city, even though there's enclaves that are red. This sure seems to be like a song that we've sung before, my friend.
It absolutely is, and you hit the nail right on the head. California is a deep blue state with a deep blue legislator and a deep blue governor. So long as both houses of the California legislature are on board, and Gavin Newsom, who is oftentimes loath to disagree with the legislator, you're going to have legislation, regardless of the fact of how far-reaching or radical it is relative to the other states in the union. And notwithstanding the fact that the regulatory consequences are oftentimes fairly grim for the people that the legislator claims to uphold and cherish through legislation of this kind. So you're absolutely right. It's par for the course for California, and it's not all too common given the kind of unipolar political landscape out in the Golden State.
Okay, so this thing is called the Fast Recovery Act. FAST being an acronym, that means it's all capitalized, means those words mean something else. I know we fiddle with the names here, but break down for folks. Before we get into what it actually does, what is it intended to do? Like, if it was in a perfect world, in a vacuum, the people that propose this legislation, it magically waves a wand and solves what?
So it is a bill that establishes a wage council. It's a commission of sorts with 10 members. Many, if not all of whom, are appointed by Governor Newsom, and some of which have to come from the restaurant industry, some of which have to come from the union walk of life. So there are certain parameters as to who can serve on the commission. But it is a commission established for the sole purpose of, and I quote the legislation here directly, establishing sector-wide minimum standards on wages, working hours, and other working conditions adequate to ensure and maintain the health, safety, and welfare of, and to supply the necessary cost of proper living to fast food restaurant workers, and to ensure and effect interagency cooperation and prompt agency responses regarding issues affecting the health, safety, and employment of fast food restaurant workers. It is essentially a regulatory blank check for this 10-member commission to set in place labor laws for a very specific industry, that being the fast food industry. Of course, the legislators' favorite friends are immunized from the council's regulatory onslaught, and we'll get into that in a minute. But in essence, there is this commission. It will be regulating labor laws, but only with respect to fast food industry workers. And this commission is empowered with substantial discretion to set the standards as it sees fit, though there are some parameters. For instance, as it's starting out, it can only go as high as $22 an hour with respect to the minimum wage. And I imagine there are other broad parameters with respect to working conditions. But the point it is all the same. The discretion of this commission to regulate the working standards of fast food industry workers is substantial.
Okay, Charles Brandt joining us. It's not that this sector doesn't need regulation, because it does. It's not that it's a sector that isn't a high priority in our economy, because the service sector industries like fast food workers are having both labor problems and shortages at the same time, even though unemployment's low. That's all valid. My concern here is I'm not necessarily anti-union. I come from West Virginia. If anybody ever needed a union, it was the coal miners. They needed a union. My problem with the modern version of the American Union is it gets too cuddly with the U.S. government. Originally, unions were just as much against the government as they were for the workers and against the companies, because my concern here is when you have the unions, which is what this commission is going to be stacked full of people, union and union adjacent. Let's all be adults here. And you have the government working hand in hand. If the workers got a problem with the union or the government, then where do they go?
That's a great question. I guess they can look inward for themselves and ask for personal advice and counsel. But you're absolutely right. It's been increasingly common, especially in the circles of Democratic politicians, for unions to have an outsized influence on policymaking. On the national stage, an example is one of the presidents of one of the biggest teachers unions, Randy Weingarten, is currently out in Ukraine doing God knows what. I'm not sure even in what capacity she's over there.
PR.
But
PR is the word you're looking for.
Yes, Andrew. I was, I guess, trying to be a bit kinder than you. I'm kidding, of course. But it's yes, the union influence, especially in Democratic policy circles, is massive, and it should come as no surprise, given the fact that public sector unions, especially, are in the pocket of today's Democratic Party and are a powerful and financially capable constituency of theirs that in the view of many, has gotten them across the finish line in pivotal elections far and wide. So it is absolutely a problem, and there is this increasing trend toward governmental collusion with the private sector as a means of advancing goals that undercut the bottom line of the common man.
That's the sound of your current hype level at the gas pump. But brace yourself for something fuel nominal, because Unleaded 88 is about to take the hype to a whole new level. Unleaded 88 is cheaper, cleaner, and greener than regular unleaded. Plus, it's homegrown, making Unleaded 88 the clear choice at the pump and totally worth the hype. So pump it up with Unleaded 88, brought to you by Iowa Corn.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Charles Brandt joining us. This bill actually is the final form of a couple other things. You detail this in your piece as well. This came out of the Fight for 15 stuff. This came out of, originally, this legislation was aimed very narrowly, directly at fast food workers. It's been expanded out a little bit. Talk about the path, because I think one thing we skip with legislation and regulation like this, we get that line item at the end like, oh, $22 minimum wage, that's what they're doing. The path that a piece of legislation like this takes actually tells you more about the intention and what it might do and where it might grow from, because we understand something like a commission, they're not going to stop expanding their power. They're going to keep pushing the limits of that power. I think the course of how this came into being is very important to understand where this might be going in the long term, and you touch on that.
Well, as you mentioned previously, it was kind of a generic push for 15. And I imagine it wasn't just in California, but across many states in the union. And now all of a sudden we've gone up to 22. But the legislator, I think, is being very clever here. Rather than simply pass into law a $22 minimum wage and face the voters in November, they have kind of put a middleman in between the voter and the legislator. And that, of course, is this wage council. So I think the commission idea is relatively novel. And it's a strategic way for the legislator to punt the issue to a commission. A very wise man once said, you form a commission when you want something to go and die there. Well, in this particular instance, I believe the legislator would like the commission to be successful in setting more onerous working conditions, working standard conditions for fast food industry workers and a higher minimum wage. But by handing the baton off to a commission, it's escaping immediate political accountability. The legislator could simply say, oh, well, the commission set the minimum wage to be X, and they're chock full of experts and industry leaders. Who are we to disagree with such a bureaucratic masterpiece? So I think it's strategic. It's something we see at the federal level as well. Congress passes these really, really vague laws with these insanely broad delegations of power to agencies. Those agencies then are granted discretion by the federal courts in interpreting their own statutes generally. And so they're interpreting broad delegations of power very broadly and oftentimes without respect to the context in which the law was originally enacted. So with respect to your original question, I think what we're seeing here is a shift away from the legislator doing something directly and handing it off to a commission as a means, I suspect, of escaping political accountability.
Yeah, Charles Brandt joining us. There's two pieces of criticism for this. You already talked about the first one, that it's basically a backdoor minimum wage raise without going through the process to do so. The other is the concern from some critics is that this is part of a larger effort to unionize the entire restaurant industry. Now, there's no secret that they would love to unionize the entire restaurant industry. There's some caveats to that, though. The restaurant industry works heavily on part-time workers. It works on seasonal workers. It works on peak hour workers is a big thing in the service industry, especially fast food industry, because they want people that work peak hours. That means usually people that have certain home circumstances where they can do things like that. These are not things that traditionally go well with a union, but there's a push for a unionization. Talk about how that force and that metric and that dynamic can change something like the fast food industry, which has always been more entry level, has been more flexible hours, both to its detriment of the workers. And I'm not saying they shouldn't do some reform on that, because the way they jerk their hours away is not fair. Completely understand that. But it does seem to be that they're trying to slam the same old square peg union thing into the very round hole, whether it's actually going to fit or not, without any idea of whether it's going to fit or not.
Right. I mean, several CEOs who fall under the unfortunate purview of this wage council have come out and said, hey, in the short term, we're going to have to pass this on to consumers. The increased prices as a result of all these regulations and these new minimum wages, we will have to pass the prices on to consumers. That means less demand for these fast food services, or food rather. I should just say fast food. And ultimately, it's going to affect the company's bottom line. It could force them to hire fewer workers. It could compel them to invest in robotic capital instead of actual human beings on the working line, because they've made the financial calculation that it's simply cheaper to invest in robotic capital as opposed to pay up to $22 an hour for a worker that the market has not valued at $22 an hour. So it could eliminate permanently jobs that many high schoolers or younger individuals work as their first job, either out of high school or during high school. A lot of those jobs might not exist anymore with regulations like these, forcing companies to pay a wage that is just simply not profitable for them. So it ultimately it is likely to have effects that are detrimental to the very workers who the legislator claims it is here attempting to uphold.
You need reliable appliances to help you conquer the day. And Menards is the one-stop shop for huge savings on new energy-efficient appliances. We carry the largest in-stock selection, starting at low prices and ready to take home today. Check out our top appliance brands including KitchenAid, Maytag, Whirlpool, Amana, and Criterion. Upgrade today and save big money on new appliances right now at Menards.
Save big money at Menards.
Yeah, and the other part of this, Charles Brandt joining us, everybody wants, it's easy to take a shot at a company like McDonald's, huge company, the standard bearer in fast food for however many years. But the problem is McDonald's doesn't run all the restaurants. These are franchisee owners. So these are actually small business owners, even though it's a McDonald mega corporation brand. California has a history of this. We saw this with the truck driver regulation where they didn't do a carve out for third-party lease owner operators, and we see what happens at the ports where they basically made it illegal. Instead of doing, well, we needed to do a carve out for that specific group. This feels like one of those things where maybe they're getting way too broad a brush instead of distinguishing. They don't distinguish between a Starbucks and a McDonald's and a Chipotle. They don't distinguish between fast casual and more fine dining. They're not distinguishing between a mega corporation where that argument, even though I still disagree with it, the argument of not passing the buck on would have more validity, and these small business owners that are franchisees owners. This seems like a way too broad a brush to me on a practical level. Does it to you as well?
It's certainly a broad brush, but what I find especially interesting in regulations of this sort is where the legislator has immunized its friends from the onerous regulations. So there are two specific exceptions in the FAST Recovery Act, which stands for the Fast Food Accountability and Standards Recovery Act, also known as Assembly Bill 257. There's what I've coined as the Panera exception. So one provision in this statute provides, and I quote, "An establishment that on September 1st, 2022 operates a bakery that produces for sale on the establishment's premises bread," and I'm skipping ahead a bit, "shall not be considered a fast food restaurant so long as it continues to operate such a bakery. This exemption applies only where the establishment produces for sale bread as a standalone menu item and does not apply if the bread is available for sale solely as part of another menu item." So that's the first exception, which is kind of mind-boggling in a sense. I think the plain meaning of the term fast food encapsulates the likes of Panera, whose food is, well, fast. And it's generally considered, though you can sit down and eat there much like at a McDonald's, it's on all fours with your kind of prototypical fast food joint. For some reason, the legislator has said, no, Panera's fine. We don't need to regulate Panera. I honestly can't think of a single reason why, especially in light of the purpose, the putative purpose set forth in the legislator, which in the preamble of the act recites, for years, the fast food sector has been rife with abuse, low pay, few benefits, and minimal job security, with California workers subject to high rates of employment violations, including wage theft, sexual harassment, and discrimination, as well as heightened health and safety risks. Well, I really can't see how that purpose is any less applicable to Panera Bread as to McDonald's or Chipotle. So there's that. There's another arbitrary exception, which seems, what McDonald's CEO said is it's really, these exceptions are the outcome of backdoor politicking. And I certainly agree with that assessment. But this particular exception provides, and I quote, fast food chain, means a set of restaurants consisting of 100 or more establishments nationally that share a common brand or that are characterized by standardized options for decor, marketing, packaging, products, and services. So if you are working for a chain that only has, let's say 100 restaurants nationally, you will not fall under the jurisdiction of this commission. But God forbid you have 101, in which case you are at the mercy of this ultra powerful regulatory bureaucracy. So it's arbitrary exemptions like these that raise eyebrows, so to speak, and make me, as a prospective lawyer, question the purported reasons for this legislation, or rather how sincere the legislator was in its conviction that these regulations were so necessary as to mandate the creation of an ultra powerful commission.
On the plus side, pretty soon you're going to be able to go in the subway and just buy the bread, because they're going to want to get all on board with that. So they will find ways around here. That's why I brought up the loopholes in the truck driver legislation, because every time they do one of these bills, it seems like they leave some kind of loophole that either makes it way worse or that people can exploit to get around what they wanted to do. Charles Brandt, great information on this. As always appreciate your insight on it. It just seems like once a year we do this with California, like literally once a year we do one of these bills. So I don't think they're going to quit doing it. And I think there's going to be some legal changes on what you just said, though, about the fact that they're doing some nationalizing regulation in the states, and expect that to show up in the courts. Till we get you back next time, my friend, hopefully not talking about California, but something else. Let folks know where they can follow you and keep up with you until we get you back on Heard Tell again.
Of course. So you can follow me at Charlie Brandt 44 on Twitter, where I post my latest op-ed pieces. And other political takes. So yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, Andrew, and thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we always enjoy having you on, my friend. He's a GW, so pray for him as he navigates the utter wilds of DC. Charles Brandt, good friend of the program. Appreciate your time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Grainger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgrainger.com or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.